Forestland Grant, that's okay too. So getting into it here, this is basically our agenda for the small Forestland Grant. We'll kind of just review. We'll let you guys know who the review panel's lined out to be, so you have an idea of who's going to be reviewing applications. We'll briefly go over the call for proposals, which is all online, and some of you may have received that email last week or the week before when that got sent out. We'll take a minute to go over an example proposal, and we'll have some Q&A in between these sections, and then Jenna will talk about the Firewise grant and do the same thing on that end. So who's going to be reviewing your proposals? You'll see a 5-person review panel here, and so we've got a pretty diverse team. Some of these folks, one from U.S. Forest Service, one from OWEB, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and then one from ODF, will have experience with technical grant scoring, reviewing, that kind of stuff. We also have 2 additional representation, one from the Oregon Small Woodlands Association, and then a landowner representative as well. So combined, that 5-person review panel will score and rank individually proposals, and then we'll all meet together as a group to kind of compile the highest scoring of those 5 reviewers and select a final list for funding. So that's what that review panel is looking like, and again, that'll be happening the week after applications are due January 21st. Okay, so now I'm going to take you to where we can find all the information that you need. Right, and so here is the landing page for Oregon Department of Forestry, and if you go to About ODF and click on the Senate Bill 762, you will see a couple different links here. Jeff talked about the Landscape Resiliency Program last week, and the Small Forestland Grant is what we'll be looking at today. Oh, are you having trouble seeing my screen? There, can I get a nod? Are we okay?
Alex, we just see the link.
Yeah, Alex, just still seeing the link. Perhaps you should disconnect and then reshare.
Great, thank you. All these folks. Great. How about now?
That's it. Thanks, Alex.
Okay, great. So again, navigating, if you just search Oregon Department of Forestry online, you'll go to Senate Bill 762. That will take you to this landing page. Jeff talked about the Landscape Resiliency Program last week, and today we're talking about the Small Forestland Grant. So this is really the landing page that has all the information that you need. And if there's something not up here, let us know. But there's a good list of kind of program components. So right now I'm talking about the Small Forestland Grant. In a minute, Jenna will talk about the Firewise community support. And below here is just an excerpt of Senate Bill 762 language, along with some frequently asked questions down at the bottom of the page. So I encourage you guys to use this page as a resource, and any information that's not on here, please reach out direct and we'll make sure to answer your question. There's a couple links here under application materials. This grant agreement is just for your reference, so you guys don't have to do anything with this grant agreement. That's more for proposals that are selected for funding. Just a reference that's a grant agreement that will be turning into agreements with individual entities once we select high scoring proposals. But the Small Forestland Grant call for proposals really has all the information you should need to apply. So, project sponsor information here. If you don't know who a project sponsor is in your area, we provided links to some of these members. Project eligibility. Okay, I'm going to just zoom in here a little bit if I can. Great. Thank you, Jenna. All right, project eligibility. So again, we're looking for proposals between 10,000 and 300,000. 75% of this cost has to go to fuel reduction treatment activities, and we'll get into how that can look for a project sponsor here in a minute. Just recognizing that we want the majority of the funds going towards treatment on private properties. Right here, you'll see funding priorities, and these funding priority numbers correlate with the project scoring selection criteria. So priority 1 here is describe how treatment activities and future condition reduces the risk of high severity wildfire. And if we go up to funding priorities, all projects must reduce the risk of high severity wildfire. So there's some additional detail under funding priorities that can help inform the criteria box on which your proposal will be scored. The bottom half of this is really how to submit applications or proposals. So we want proposals that come to this address here with the subject line, 2021 SFG, whatever your name of the project is. And with that, we're asking for 3 documents: a project area map, a budget worksheet, which is included on the landing page, and then a written proposal. And the written proposal will have this information here, kind of bolded like this. And then all 3, please submit them as a PDF. In the past, we have gotten submissions as Word documents, and if for whatever reason you can't submit as a PDF, let us know, and we'll be sure to catalog that. But it just helps us keep it clean if they're all PDFs. You'll see some map requirements down below here. Pretty simple, but just enough to kind of give us a visual of what this project, what your proposal looks like, where it is, types of treatments, that kind of thing. Okay, some additional information about kind of updates and final reports. So just to know what you're getting into there, but I won't go much more into that. I think next what I want to do is pull up a project example. And let's see if I can pull it over here. Okay, Jenna or Derek, let me know if this is viewable. Is this small enough? Derek, can I get a head nod, or do I need to zoom in a little bit?
It looks like you're still on the previous document. So when you go from, say, a web browser to a Word document or to a PDF, you have to stop and reshare that application and the document in that application.
Great. Thanks, Derek. Are you guys seeing this PDF right now?
The 2021 Small Forestland Grant Program Call for Proposals.
Fantastic. Okay. So I've just included some information here at the top, and that was pulled straight from the call for proposals. But right here, you'll see basically what I did is I just pulled that eligible applicant information. So project name, contact information, and I started populating it, right? And so if we got a, without this top half, but if this was an application submitted as a PDF, this is what we're looking for. So, the name of the project, contact information. So right here, we've got the Willamette Watershed Council. We have a name, title, email, kind of your standard contact information. If you are engaging an ODF, forester or OSU extension agent, OSU staff for that matter, list that in there just so we kind of have an idea of who you're working with at the local level there. Not necessary, but whoever your co-applicant is, for example, we want to have that information. So the first box here, it's called treatment location, but this is really, it's a brief description of land ownerships and project locations. And so I think many of you may have heard this called an overview, right? So we really just want to get an idea of, where is this project? What is it doing, right? And so this first sentence, we've identified, moderate and low risk. It encompasses 3 acres. We're looking for a 150-acre treatment as proposed. You've mentioned that there's already, within that 300-acre footprint, there's already 150 acres that received treatment. And then you've kind of given us some information about who you're working with. So 100 acres from 8 pre-identified landowners, and you're expecting an additional 50 acres from new landowners that you have yet to reach out to. So we don't expect that you guys have every single landowner pre-identified, but given that we want the majority of these funds to support fuel reduction, we do expect that, the majority of them may have been pre-identified. Okay, you've given us an idea of kind of what the land ownership is here. So, the potentials that may receive treatment are between 1 and 80 acres. Great, that kind of gives us an idea of who you'll be engaging in this project. And then you've made a note, that we're not going to treat any landowners that own more than 160 acres, Willamette Valley being on the west side of the Cascades. If it was on the east side, you could say 640 here. So this description of treatment activities really is the largest box. You have 350 words. And, we want you to describe proposed treatment activities, who's completing the treatments, and then quantify priorities 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so I think I've got that just pulled right up here. Apologies. Oh boy.
Alex, while you're looking at that, let's take a break just for a second real quick and answer a couple of the questions that have come in. First and foremost, just because you were just talking about it, I wanted to get the first question here of curious if owning more than 160 acres makes you ineligible, or if you can apply for specific plots of contiguous land. So I just want to have you be clear on the property ownership maximum that's within the bill, just to get that out up front.
Yeah. Thanks, Derek. And we've had a couple of questions about this, and the way that bill language is written is ownership's up to 160 acres. And so if someone owns 500 acres, but they only want to treat 80, they own more than the allotted amount. If it was west side. So 160 acres is total ownership. That's not just treatment location. So I hope that clears that one up. And, if we want, we could pause for a break for any questions regarding the call for proposals.
I think the only other question here right now, Alex, is if we can make the sample proposal available on the website once we're done with the presentation.
Absolutely. I thought that question would be coming, and yeah, we'll throw it up there for sure. Yeah, thank you. Okay,
easy enough. Thanks.
Okay, so let's keep going. So the submissions here again. I just wanted to confirm that when we're talking about the application process, quantify or explain how priorities 5, 6, 7, and 8. These priorities are referencing these numbers here. Okay. So I didn't write out each individual priority, but those are the numbers. And so when you're putting together your application, that's what we're looking for in each of those sections. Okay, back to the application example. Okay, great. So treatment activities, this is your largest box, 350 word limit. What I've done here is I've just explicitly called out which, I'm not sharing anymore, am I? That's great. Man, I'm having a good time. Normally this is not, I don't have that much of an issue with this, but thanks for the team for keeping me honest here. All right. Are we seeing this? Great. Okay. So description of treatment activities. What I did in this example is I just called out specifically which priority a sentence or two was addressing. So right here, I say priority 2, that's the project protects infrastructure and improves shaded fuel breaks. You'll notice in addition to those two, high risk areas is in the priority 2. So does it address high risk areas? Does it protect infrastructure or improve shaded fuel breaks? Priority 3, this treatment will occur on at least 10 properties. So that's letting me know that you are treating multiple properties. You've given me a description of how these treatments will be accomplished. So you've kind of broken it out to say the majority will be 100 acres of contract. Landowners will be doing some of this work. And then ODF field crews will be engaged as well. And so now I'm kind of getting in my head, what this is looking like on the ground. You've let us know who's kind of doing the outreach and engagement with adjacent landowners, responsible for monitoring and reporting. And then you've kind of made a nod to what ODF staff will be doing in addition to treatment, field crew treatments. So priority 1, this is where I expect the majority, at least half of this box. If you really want to describe how you're reducing the risk of high severity wildfire, we'll want to spend some time kind of laying out explicitly what your treatment activities are. And so that's what this next paragraph is. You're letting us know that there will be some non-commercial thinning. You've kind of specified what type of non-commercial thinning. So we're looking at smaller diameter trees. You're going to be doing it from below to raise the canopy height. So you're selecting those, maybe suppressed or intermediate tree species. You're also going to prune low-hanging conifer branches that might be remaining on site. Not happening everywhere, but where there are low-hanging conifers, maybe it's a younger stand. You're going to prune some of those up. You've given me a target, treatment specification of 8 feet above the ground. You're also, this project says brush and brush mowing and massication will occur on 75 acres. And so there's a treatment of surface fuel. And so I'm starting to get the picture that we're having, multiple treatments at different levels within this forest to address high severity wildfire, meaning, canopy crown fire type potential. Invasive species, including blackberries and Scotch broom, are going to be spot sprayed, and so that's an additional resource concern. Priority 4, you're going to remove large, dead and dying, drought and storm damaged trees. So you've listed kind of the acreage on which this impact is, and then you've listed kind of, what the 2021 winter storm, for example. So this gives me an idea of, okay, it's a winter storm, 50 acres were hit hard. You guys may take something larger than 8-inch diameter for non-commercial thinning in this area. Great. You're also letting us know how you're treating that material. So the majority of it is going to be piled and burned. But some of this from non-commercial thinning may not be piled and burned. And it looks like this project's proposing 25 acres, a couple cords being turned into firewood, and then a small component being turned into biochar. And so this addresses priority 8, which is alternative use for this cut material. You've also, this one did a really good job of saying residual cut material will not exceed 3 inches or extend 24 inches above ground. Sometimes there's a lop and scatter component to these projects where you just cut and leave that material. And, this one's kind of quantified to what extent that will be. And so it looks like smaller diameter material, if they have to do this, will not extend beyond 2 feet above the ground. Great. Okay. Let's see. And so, you've also mentioned that there's a young stand component here. And so you've given us a target of what the canopy gap may be for this area. And then you've also made a note that maintenance plans are going to focus on controlling rust and invasive species. So, in my mind, I've kind of got a good idea of what this project is attempting to do and how it's reducing the risk of high severity wildfire.
So, Alex,
yeah.
So Alex, before moving on to the next section, can we review some of the eligibility criteria? We've got a few questions in the Q&A that are focused on that. So while you talked about acreage limits earlier, there's some returning questions about acreage limits and needing a sponsor. So if you could cover that again, and we'll see if that addresses all of these questions. And then I might ask some specific questions of these FAQs as well. And then at least to one of the attendees, the Firewise will be addressed later. So we will we'll address Firewise communities when Jenna starts presenting. But Alex, if you could just cover the sponsorship requirements and the size of ownership, both the west side and east side of the Cascade Range Crest.
Sure. To do that, I'm going to share screen again. Let me know if I get it right. And again, this information is all available on that call for proposals. But just to clarify, so in that call for proposals, I'll scroll to the top here. Right, this is what is on that landing page. And right here, there's information about the project sponsors, right? And so what we're saying here is project sponsors may bill up to 10% of the grant for indirect expenses. There are some direct expenses that a project sponsor, I'm thinking of, ODF has fuel crews out there that they actually treat landowner properties. And so if that project sponsor is exceeding 10%, that's all right, as long as at least 75% of the project costs are going to fuel reduction treatments. So the 10% is an indirect cost, and we want the majority, 75% or greater of project costs to go directly to treatments on private property. Treatment planning, prescription planning is I would consider that part of working with a contractor to determine what you're taking out of a forest, or what the treatment looks like. That is, I would classify that as a direct expense, right? So there is some flexibility there, but I think I may be able to answer this a little bit better when we get into the budget worksheet.
Sure. But just is it a yes or no question about whether a landowner needs a sponsor to submit an application?
Gotcha. Oh, okay, gotcha. So for the small Forestland Grant, there is a list of eligible applicants. And so what you're looking at on the screen here, project sponsors must be one of the following organizations. So one landowner could not submit an application just for their individual property. We're asking them to work with a project sponsor on this. 501c3 organizations are eligible project sponsors, watershed councils, your county or city, if they're working on behalf of landowners, all eligible. But individual landowners submitting for work on their land on this program, not eligible. When we get into the Firewise application, Firewise communities can independently submit for that work. Does that clear it up?
I believe so. And then if you could just run over the acreage limits again by landowner and region.
Sure. So project eligibility right here in the call for proposals. If a landowner owns more than 160 acres west of the Cascade Mountain crest, they're ineligible to receive treatment. So if they have five parcels, 20, 40, 120, and a 10, that landowner owns more than 160 acres, right? So that's on the west side. On the east side, east of the Cascade Mountain crest, at 640 acres. So it is ownership that we're going on here. We've had a number of questions about this. This may change in next bienniums, but for this biennium, landowners need to have less than these amounts to be eligible to receive funding.
So is there any difference between rangeland, forest land, paying rangeland? It's really if an owner owns more than 160 acres or 640 acres, they are ineligible regardless of the type of property it is. It's total acreage of property ownership.
Yes, that's how we've written this for this biennium. So if you own more than 160 acres west of the Cascade Mountains, you will be ineligible to receive this funding. So obviously we are targeting those smaller ownership, 5, 10, 20 acre, single 40 acre tract type ownerships. You would be eligible for the landscape scale resiliency program, which Jeff talked about last week. So this is not the only funding opportunity out there for landowners. But for the small Forestland Grant, we are targeting those small ownerships.
Yeah. Thank you. Before we move on, Alex, sorry, just want to get a few more of these questions addressed, and I think this is a good one. If a landowner owns 600 acres on the east side and 50 on the west side, would they be ineligible? So how does ownership on either side of the Columbia or the Cascade Crest affect eligibility?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess, in that example, let's say they own 600 on the east side and 40 on the west side. In my mind, we might have to do that on a case-by-case basis, but they would still fall in that up to 640 acres limit for the east side. So really we're targeting folks that are not owning hundreds of acres out there with this grant program. Okay. If you guys have a lot of those, feel free to send me an email on this stuff. But I think if they own more than these allotted amounts, then they're going to be ineligible. So if they own less than 160 on the west and less than 640 on the east, and in combination, that would be eligible. But if they own more west than 160 acres, that would be ineligible ownership.
So just a couple more associated questions, as a bunch are coming in as we're talking about this. So let's see. Could a neighborhood association be a sponsoring organization? I'm assuming they could if they meet the descriptions that are listed in your project sponsor list.
Absolutely, Derek. So if that's a 501c3 organization, they would be eligible to apply for the Small Forestland Grant. Jenna's going to get into the Firewise community grant in a second here, and those they will be accepting like HOA, homeowner association entities to be a project sponsor as well. So it's a little different for the Firewise versus the Small Forestland Grant. But if you're a 501c3 organization or one of these other organizations, you would be an eligible project sponsor for this grant opportunity. Does that?
Yeah, I think so. And there's a few other questions here, and I'm going to ask one or two for them to be addressed by you, and then I'm going to refer everyone else on some of these questions to email the Small Forest Land Grant Program email box. that there might be some very specific questions that you have that can be addressed on a case-by-case basis, and may not be best for a general question response. So just in relation to property size, is quote unquote property defined as a tax lot?
Is property defined as a tax lot?
Yeah, in the case of this RFP, is a property defined as a tax lot?
The way we've been interpreting it is ownership. So if you own multiple tax lots that exceed this amount, you would be ineligible.
Okay. If the service area has more than one targeted area community, should we submit more than one application? That may be a Firewise question. So I'm not certain, but if you can see the Q&A, Alex, we'll leave the Firewise questions for Jenna's portion of the presentation. And I will just throw in to everyone right now that we were originally scheduled from 2 until 3, but we are hanging on past 3 to make sure that appropriate time is spent for Alex's portion, and then for Jenna to cover the Firewise community aspect of the grants here. So don't feel like we're in a hurry to 3 o'clock. We will be sticking around. Hopefully that means that most of you will be able to participate as well, but we'll be getting to Firewise in about another 10 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes. So I just want to make sure that we address some of these questions and then move on to the rest of Alex's presentation. Some of these are around treatments. So let's move on for now, Alex, and we'll let you cover some of these. We'll cover some of these in the next break, but I wanted to cover the questions about eligibility, property ownership, and size while we had you on that topic. Thanks for letting me do that.
No, appreciate it, Eric. And this recording will be available on the website a couple days after we have a chance to package it up and put it on there. So if you have to leave early, we'll go until we answer these questions. But getting back to it, I do see Ian's question, and he says if the service area has more than one target area or community, should they submit more than one application? Let's, in the context of the small Forestland Grant, if you wanted to submit one application that had multiple target areas, that would be fine. We'd want that identified on the project map, and we'd expect that you would kind of, go through that in the application to describe the 2 project areas. Again, if you had 2 $300,000 project areas, then that would be 2 applications, right? And you can submit more than one. So I think that answers Ian's question. I've got a question for Megan, and she's asking, would treating post-fire regen be an eligible practice? Yes, in the context that it reduces high severity wildfire risk, right? And so if it was a dirty burn, meaning it burned some of the fuel, but it left a lot of standing dead, or there was some mortality associated with it afterwards, that would be an eligible practice. But purely, let's say planting trees after a fire, that would be considered ineligible, just in the fact that it doesn't really reduce high severity wildfire risk. And there are other funding opportunities for that. Okay. So I see another question about lessee who is in legal control of a piece of land apply for the program if the landowner owns more than the limits on Westry side. We're going by ownership again. So if the landowner owns more than the allotted 160 on the west or 640 on the east, ineligible. So I see that this is a hot topic, and I'm free to kind of work through these one-on-one as we go. But generally, we're going by ownership, and I'm going to keep going with the presentation now. So, okay. I did want to just take a minute, and we are running a little bit behind schedule, but I wanted to take an opportunity to just work through the budget worksheet. And so I'll put up that example online, and you guys can go through that at your leisure here in the next couple days. I'm going to try sharing screen again. All right. Let me move this. All right. You guys seeing the screen here? Derek, can I get a nod? Perfect. Okay, great. All right, so this budget application, this budget worksheet is online as well. And so you'll see here, what you need to fill in, the name of your project. These deliverables would be pulled from your listed activities. And so this budget worksheet matches that example project. And so they've listed the different activities here that they're doing, specifying number of acres. Right, they're going to, on 25 acres, they're going to turn 4 cords of firewood. They're going to turn a couple tons of slash into biochar. So they're listing your treatment activities, and then below here is your cost categories. And so this is pretty standard stuff for those of you who've routinely applied for administrative grants. Your grant request amount is going to go on the left. If you have any match or leverage, those are those 2 boxes. And then the total project cost here is here. ODF, there's a line here, this would be read OSU as well. So if you're working with OSU rather than ODF, that would be the line to put in there. Okay. There's a narrative justification by line item. And, I think we gave a pretty good example here at the top. We just want to specify the amounts and how you came up with that amount, right? The other thing to think about putting in here is, if you are going to be using, let's say, an ODF fuel crew, and some of your personnel and fringe is going to go towards actually treating landowner properties, this would be a good place to kind of specify, 80% of the personnel and fringe is going to be spent on a fuel crew, right? That way, the reviewers know you're not violating that 75%. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing again, and I've got one more. All right, project map, and then we'll get to some questions here. So appreciate you guys bearing with me on this Zoom. Okay, great. Are you guys seeing this, Derek? Am I getting the head nod? Fantastic. All right. So I made this very quickly on Google Earth. ArcGIS is a great platform, and for those of you that have it, really hoping that we can get some good detail from those. But if you don't, Google Earth works free for users as well. So it's zoomed out large enough to show us how it relates to the surrounding area. I can see kind of a local town up here, South Lebanon. Great. I've got an idea of where this project is now. And then I've got in the legend, I've just identified what these different lines are, right? So the yellow is the entire project area. And then, we've specified which treatment activities are occurring where. All right, so we've got orange is storm damage. Green is a previously treated OWEB grant. You've given us the name and number of the grant. Great, so if we need to look that up, we can. We've got some mowing mastication in here, and then we've got some pre-commercial thinning, pruning, and pile and burning. So, these can overlap. I mean, this could be 100 acres of all 4 of these treatments within the same, and then you could just list those. I've listed the coordinate system, which is a requirement. I also have coordinates up here. This is our scale bar, north arrow, and township range, right? And so these are basically the minimum requirements of a map. I'm going to try to zoom out here just so you guys can see, we're not looking for anything fancy, just something to give the reviewers an idea of what's going on out there. The pictures are worth 1,000 words and all that. So that's the map. That's an example of the map. All right. And now I'm going to come back to some questions here. And Derek, if you can help me, it looks like,
yeah, I think the first 2 questions there, or at least the Firewise question, maybe if prescribed fire is an eligible treatment.
Oh, perfect. Yes, it is, Megan. It is 100% an eligible treatment. And if you go to that call for proposals that's online, you can see kind of some examples of eligible treatments. Prescribed fires at the top of that list. So yes, 100% eligible. Just keep in mind, these are reimbursements, right? So, I mean, you'll have to incur the expense and then submit an invoice for those expenses incurred. I see Kate McPherson. Thanks for figuring out what we left off, Derek. I see Kate's got a question. Can a collective of small landowners that is a CPO apply for this grant, or does a CPO need to find a sponsoring organization? CPO, Derek, do you know what she's referring to there? Is that?
I do not know.
Okay, so if that CPO is a 501c3, or a watershed council or a land trust, then they could apply. If it's a, let's say, a for-profit, then they would have to work with a nonprofit to sponsor that. So yes, generally, if a small group of landowners is looking to get engaged on this, I would encourage them to reach out to one of those project sponsors that's listed in that call for proposals, and it's got a link to maps for those various project sponsors if you need help kind of identifying who's in your area. All right, I'm going to move down after 8. I see. Okay, so NASIT represents an HOA, a homeowners association, and can they qualify for both the Small Forestland Grant and the Firewise funding? If that HOA is a 501c3, then they would be an eligible applicant, right? So I think that's the easiest way. I do want to make a note for folks that the Small Forestland Grant can support Firewise communities. The Firewise Community Grant is specifically for Firewise communities to apply and work directly on their separate funding source. So it doesn't mean that you can't treat Firewise communities or members of Firewise communities through the Small Forestland Grant. There's just another, application specifically for Firewise communities. Okay, and I've got another question from Brandon. He says, please clarify the watershed HUC 6 wildfire risk class of high or extreme. It seems easy to define risk class as high extreme in the sub-watersheds. However, the HUC 6 shows a basin-wide area. So on that call for proposals, there's a link to the Oregon Wildfire Risk Explorer. When you click that link, and I believe Jenna's going to actually perform this when she gets into the Firewise grant application, it'll pull up a map, and that landing page map has the HUC 6 pre-identified.
So
Okay.
Alex, someone added in here that CPO is a community planning organization. I don't know if that changes your answer, but thank you so much for clarifying that for us.
Yes, thank you, Claire. If that CPO is a 501c3, or has a nonprofit status, then yes, they could apply. So I guess it doesn't change it much, but now we know what a CPO is. All right, thank you. And so just coming back up to where I left off here, as an SW, Brandy's got a question. She asks, as a soil and water conservation district, could I sponsor several properties across my district? Would they need to be contiguous, or could they be spread across the landscape? Is there a limit on the total number of acres in the treatment area, as long as the individual ownership is specified, it is met? So the first question, can they be spread across the landscape? Absolutely. If you have identified some strategic landowners across your county, across your planning area, they don't need to be 100% adjacent. I brought up that example as kind of a perfect application that is addressing, multiple adjacent property owners next to previous fuel treatment areas. But you may be able to demonstrate that with a couple large properties across your planning area. So they do not need to be contiguous. The second question she had was, is there a limit on the total number of acres? Absolutely not. As long as you're meeting the minimum ownership requirements of who's getting those funding, the more acres, the better, as long as we're, hitting the objectives of the grant. Okay, moving on down here. This question may be addressed later, but is there a way to link up other landowners to form a Firewise community or join an existing one? I think we should leave that for Jenna when she talks about the Firewise community. There absolutely is a way, and I think she'll paint some of that when she gets into her section of the presentation. Cecilia's got a question. As a landowner, how do I access a resource to identify the treatment needed? And Cecilia, that's a fantastic question. And that's actually why we're relying on project sponsors, is we recognize that identifying what treatment is needed is a relatively technical question to answer. And so I would encourage you to reach out to one of those project sponsors to identify, a potential site visit or what treatment you may need on your property. Okay.
So Alex, before moving on to Jenna, I do want to make sure that we get Jenna going and are able to cover the Firewise portion. But I think there's one more question here from Farmer Dan that says, I own 20 acres of forest land just as an owner, yet I am listed as a part owner in an LLC, which owns 400 acres. Am I ineligible to apply?
Gosh, Dan, We're getting into the, oh man, I love it. Well, let's see. So you're part owner in an LLC, but you as an individual, I guess, if you as an individual own less than the allotted amount and you're not the majority owner of the LLC, then I would think that would mean that you would be eligible under the definition of ownership. Yep.
All right, Alex, I'm going to give you a break. Thank you so much for running through all that. And thank you for answering all of the questions in the Q&A. Thank you, all of the participants, for adding your questions in the Q&A so we can run through those. Please, if you have additional questions, put them in the Q&A. We'll come back to those sorts of questions after Jen is able to run through the Firewise portion of the grant program and address some questions on the Firewise side. So thank you so much, Jenna. Take it away.
Thanks, Derek, and thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. My name is Jenna. If you have logged in a little bit later than when we did introductions here, I told many of the Firewise communities to join us at about 2:30. So if you're new and joined us, welcome. I'm about to cover some information about this Firewise piece of the grant that you guys have probably seen gracing your emails and multiple emails from my side of things. But I'm going to go ahead and just jump into it. Just to let you guys know, I'm going to do a fairly quick presentation of just basically the application and try and point out some things that I've gotten questions on. And then I just want to leave a lot of ample time for you guys to ask questions if you have any clarifying, because we give you a lot of information on this and it's definitely difficult to digest. So let's see if I can overcome the technical pieces of everything and get going on this. So do you guys see my presentation, or is this actually you're seeing my map, aren't you?
Nope, Jenna, we see the PowerPoint. Okay,
great. Thank you. Okay, so we're doing the Firewise USA Small Forestland Grant Program, which is a mouthful, but I appreciate all the Firewise members who are on this call and all of the hard work that you guys have done out there, and all of your regional coordinators who's also worked with you and done a lot of work. And a lot of you guys haven't had any funding resources available to you, and I know you're excited about this opportunity. So let's see what we can do to help clarify. So we're going to talk about the grant, and then we're going to talk about your questions. Basic requirements of this: it does have to be fuels mitigation focused, and then defensible space focused. So either one of those are acceptable pieces to this. You do have to be an existing Firewise community. This is not for the creation of new Firewise communities. This is for all of those people out there who've been working really hard to make their homes more fire safe, and now we finally have a funding source for them. So I'm excited to get this out to you guys. There's two different funding sources here, and if we need to, kind of at the end of the presentation, I can go into a little bit more detail on them, but I'm hoping most of you guys have read your applications, which has all of the breakdown of these two different pieces, and I'll pull it up at the end if we need to talk about them some more. Lastly, just keeping in perspective that this work will need to be completed by June 15th, 2023. So that gives us some significant time and even a couple of Firewise renewals in there to get this funding spent. So keep that in mind. I'm not sure if there will be a second go for this or not. It really depends on how much of the funding goes out the door and what kind of projects we get. We've never done this before, so we're going to find out. So I'm going to quickly run through the application. I hope that it's pretty straightforward for you guys, but make sure that when you're filling this out at the very top there, that you're indicating the number of acres and which funding pool you're looking to request and how much that is, so that we know kind of what the amount of grant funding you're looking for. Make sure you include your name. And then as for the rest of it, it's pretty straightforward. We've got the risk rating, which I'm going to go over how to find that in case you're not a GIS person and you don't know how to use some of these mapping things. I'm going to do that after we talk about this application piece. So hold tight. There's also a link in there that you can click on if you didn't realize. There's a box around Oregon Explorer that you can directly click on there when you're looking at the application, and we'll pull up the Oregon Explorer website that you can find this information. How long have you been established as a Firewise community? And then urban growth boundary is also in that mapping program that I'm going to show you that piece as well. And also there is a embedded link around Oregon Explorer for that piece too. The reason behind kind of the urban growth boundary piece is just to try to get some of this funding out to some of those rural communities that generally don't have the resources and the availability to get kind of funding for a lot of the work that they need done. And so we decided that that was going to be a priority in this grant. The number of dwelling units does need to match what you have last put into your Firewise portal. So if you have originally applied for a lower amount, like you guys started out with 25 people, and now you're 60 people, you just want to go with consistently what your last information you put into the Firewise portal is. So just to be clear on that. Also, if you are applying and you want to include other people in the community who have not been put in the portal, that have decided now that there's funding available and they want to be part of it, the way that we're going to handle that is that when you apply for the application, you need to make sure that this part, the number of dwelling units, is the same as what you have in the Firewise portal. When you write kind of on the bottom description, you need to indicate then that you will have additional people joining in and kind of explain that piece of it. We do want to prioritize the people who have been doing this and have been part of the Firewise communities, so far. And so that does need to be a priority, but if that's taken care of and we've prioritized the people who want to be a part of this, who have been part of Firewise communities, you can have additional members join in of that community, specifically of the community that's already established, not a new community. Hopefully that clarifies. I've gotten a lot of questions about that. Okay, so then the next piece is the previous grant funding. So I specifically made this over $1,000 because many of you have applied for that $500 State Farm grant. We don't want to make that, you guys less eligible just because you've gotten that State Farm grant through Firewise NFPA. So any kind of large amounts of grant funding, anything over $1,000 that you've gotten, you will need to report that there to us. It doesn't mean you're ineligible. It just means you might not get as high a score. So it's all just about scoring here. The next piece is the agency priorities. We just want to make sure that you're check marking, what you're doing. If you're doing a fuels mitigation projects, then you get a check mark. And if you're doing defensible space on top of it, you also get a check mark. So you can have both of those, one of those. If it's neither of those, you shouldn't be applying to this program. So also then the previous work, we need to be indicating sort of what you guys have done previously. And so what did you do this last year? The last thing that you put into the Firewise portal, again, consistency with that. This is what I'm going to be double checking these against. If we get kind of our top ones, I'm going to make sure that they are accurate with that. Did you do a fuels vegetation removal type of event, or did you do education outreach, or did you do both? And that can adjust your scoring there. So lastly, there's a description of the project. We just want to get some understanding of what exactly you're planning on doing with this funding and why you need as much as you're asking for. So I'll give you some examples here shortly that might help you figure out how to write that box. If you have any questions or you're having trouble with this, please feel free to reach out. Many of you have tracked me down. I'm on the NFPA website, all my information, I'll leave it at the end here too. So there'll be plenty. Oh, and somebody indicated you can't see the box. Well, there's nothing to see actually at the end. It's just a box. So description of project, the bottom there. There is a box underneath it, but this is just a snapshot and I couldn't fit the box itself on the page. So you guys have seen it. So let me get out of this. I'm going to talk about the map really quick on how to do that. So I'm going to stop share and bring up the map here for you guys. Hopefully it'll let me do this easily. Share. Okay. So hopefully you guys are seeing this map of Oregon Explorer. If you clicked on the link, good. Okay, thanks, Derek. So if you clicked on the link, this is what it's going to bring you to. You're going to be looking at a map here and you're like, what do I do now? Maybe you don't know a lot about maps. So you on the left-hand side here, you're going to see a go to layers. That's a good option to start with, just so you understand that these are the things that are selected right now. You're already selected on the Watershed Summaries piece. So this is your risk. So that very first question on that application, I think it was the first question, it might be the second, but the application where it asks you for what risk you are, you go ahead and go up in here. You're going to put something in there. You put your address in there, let's say, and you look it up. Well, maybe Oregon Explorer might be working today. Let's just do this in Kaiser. Okay. So you look it up and you're like, oh, nothing's happening. Well, over on the left-hand side, something is happening. It's trying to find what address you put in. So you're clicking on this address and it's going to zoom you in. Now you're looking at it, you're going, okay, this looks like a bunch of yellow. What am I doing here? So you're going to exit out of this. I know this seems complicated, but it's not as bad as it looks. And then you're going to go down and there's a little plus sign right here next to your watershed summaries. And it's going to tell you, what does this color mean? Okay, so you're looking at it and you're like, okay, this looks like it's in a moderate, right? So I'm in this moderate area. So that's your risk. When you go back into the thing, that's the risk. So you got to hit this little plus button to see what color means what. If you have any problems with this, please feel free to get a hold of me and I will walk you through it. It's not too difficult, but some people have a hard time with this kind of thing and I recognize this. So your regional coordinator should be able to help you as well. So the next piece, let's get out of this. Let's say you're back kind of to the normal. Let's go back out and you're back in here again. And you're like, okay, I need to go find, am I in an urban growth boundary? So the other part of it, apologies for the movement, I'm going to get back out again, is under administrative boundaries. There's a little plus mark right there to the left-hand side. Also, just in case you guys are interested, there's these little eyes here. They'll tell you what each one of these layers mean. So one of these is urban growth boundary. You're going to select it and then you can see, hey, look, there's yellow lines. So if you're within that yellow line and it's around a community or a county or a city or whatever, that means you're within the urban growth boundary. So again, you put your address in, you're going to zoom in, you're going to check and see if you're in the urban growth boundary. So both of those pieces are in this map. Again, if you have a really hard time with GIS, feel free to reach out to me and I'll walk you through it. So that's just kind of the general two pieces that you need for that application. We're using Oregon Explorer as our particular map. So please don't go find those in other places. This is the map we're using. So I'm going to stop share on that piece. Is there questions so far in that I need to get to, Derek, or can I keep going?
Yeah, let's stop for questions. But before getting to the questions, I just want to reiterate to folks that while we were originally scheduled from 2 to 3, we will be continuing past 3 to make sure that we can cover the content and address questions in the Q&A. So we'll continue rolling, but let's address some of these questions and then we'll have you finish the next section, Jenna. So I just want to make sure, I think you addressed this, but it's a question that was in there earlier. Is there a way to link up with other landowners to form a Firewise community or to join an existing one? I just want to make sure that you're clear on that and whether there's whether new communities, Firewise communities, are eligible under this program, or whether it must be an existing and set, or whether someone can join one and then be eligible as part of a new member of an existing community.
Yeah, and yeah, I did address it, but I'll make it more clear too, because I think it's an important point, which is that if you don't have a Firewise community in your area, unfortunately, you are not eligible for this. This is for existing Firewise communities. If your community has a boundary around it that they're indicating that they're a Firewise community and you are in those boundaries and part of that, but you haven't signed up for the program, then if the community that is doing the application decides that they would like to include you, they can. We're leaving it up to the community as to whether or not they would like to include additional people. We want to prioritize, though, the people who have been doing the work and who have been doing this without any funding so far. So just keep that in mind. You do not have to include other people in your community, but if you would like to, you can. So finding a community, you have to be within the boundaries that they have already kind of put into the program. And so that could be very difficult unless you're already sort of in an existing area.
Thank you, Jenna. Just rolling from the top of the questions here, there's one from Ray. Do I need to have firm commitments from homeowners as participants, or can I use an estimate or goal for the number of participants and acreage in the project?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, any project that has firm commitments is more likely to be successful. We expect that if we give you this fund, you're doing the work. So I would encourage it. I would say that Commitments in the sense of somebody signing a piece of paper or something, no, you don't have to go that far. But as long as the people are saying, yes, we definitely want to be part of this program, we want to do this, then that would be really good. I'd say that I would caution you on saying that you have people want to sign up and you don't know for sure, just because there's kind of a tax liability piece, and this funding, we really want to make sure that it gets spent out and not sent back. So some sort of at least verbal, yes, we are going to be doing this would be good to have.
Okay, so we are starting to get a lot of questions here for Firewise, so let's kind of burn through some of these.
I can roll through them. Let me just, I
Okay.
can see it now. Let me do it. Okay.
Gotcha.
As fast as I can, because we got more to go. So the $1,000 minimum did not get dropped in regards to the total amount of grant that you need to apply for. That is the minimum, but the minimum that was dropped was the per landowner minimum. So each, let's say you have 10 different landowners in a community who want to apply and they want to do $10,000. Before we were sort of saying, well, we couldn't do like 500 per person. But now we're saying, yes, that is going to be acceptable, that the minimum per landowner is not necessarily going to be at that 1,000 mark, which is where we started at, but the total grant application amount has to be a minimum of $1,000. So hopefully that clears that up. Did the grant we previously received for, okay, did the grant we previously received for the fuels reduction, we got one for iPads to populate in Terra. Oh, okay. B for, okay. I mean, that one might be kind of a specific one to your community, and we'd have to talk it out. If you guys got grant funding for iPads for Intera, that might be a different type of grant. If it wasn't actually fuels mitigation, we're talking about grants that were for like fuels mitigation, defensible space projects, not specifically for like a technology side of things. So I think you would still be applicable, and you wouldn't need to account for that unless you were specifically using the funding to do fuels mitigation work. Does that sound like what I answered the question there, Derek?
I think so, yes.
Okay, so what's the difference between, so I think field mitigation and fuels reduction. Okay, so those are somewhat interchangeable. We're just talking, I'm sorry, mitigation and is generally what we call fuels reduction type of work. So they're sort of the same thing. I don't know that there's really a big difference there. What we're saying there is like fuels reduction where you're doing pruning, thinning, removing debris, making sort of a defensible space type of thing, but fuels mitigation can be more than just around the home. Let's say you're treating like 40 acres, then obviously the defensible space piece is going to be up around the home. And then anything out kind of beyond that is sort of a fuels mitigation type of activity. So under risk rating, according to your map, we have low to very high in our district. Okay, our last action plan submitted to the Firewise portal as our risk assessment for our district at high risk. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand this question. So they're talking about the risk rating on the map. And so when they go into the map, they're seeing that they have low to very high in their district. But their last action plan that was submitted to the Firewise portal, unfortunately, I don't know what they were using for their action plan to consider it a high risk. So I think that we'd have to have an offline conversation about that. It sounds like there might be some confusion. Whoever turned in the application, they were using something to indicate that it was a high risk area. So we'd have to talk about it, but I will just say that right now for this particular grant, it's all going to go back to that map because we have to be consistent between all the areas. So at this point, the Oregon Explorer is going to trump anything else when it comes to filling out your application. Okay, so here's another question. What if, I'm going to have to go back to my presentation in a minute just so I can kind of finish it up, but what if one owner got a grant before there was a Firewise community? Is that counted on the application? That's a good question. Alex, I might throw that one to you. I don't know. I think that to get so technical on these. If somebody got a grant in their, let's say in their community area, but that was prior to becoming established Firewise, would we consider that to be a grant? I would say maybe no, we wouldn't, because it would be the community itself, and that specific community was created when they applied for Firewise. But I want to hear your side. You're good. Okay, so let's go with that for now. I'm going to go back to my presentation for a minute just to kind of get through it so that I can kind of just give you guys a couple of examples, and it might answer some of these other questions, if that's okay, just because we're getting far in time.
Yep. While you're navigating there, Linda's got a question. Can she access Oregon Explorer as a private citizen? Yes,
Yes.
it's freely available online. So we'll knock that one off, and back to you, Jen.
Great, thanks. Yeah, this is all available to the public. All of this stuff is available, even our website that has all the information about the grants and all the mapping, everything is available to anybody in the public. So I thought I'd do just a really quick couple of examples for you guys to give you a better understanding of what we're looking for on these, for what a potential application could look like. Now, yours may not look anything like this. That's okay. This is just an example. So this is a smaller funding source. And so let's just say you have a community of like 15 dwelling units in there, and in your description box, excuse me, talking too much here. You're just saying you want to do rebates for $500 per landowner for fuels mitigation work on property, including removing vegetation out of the 0 to 5 foot zone, limbing and pruning bushes and trees in the 5 to 30 foot zone around the home, and you're doing up to about an acre of land per landowner. So that's going to total you out about $7,500. Then you guys want to get a chipper, and it's about $600 a day, a couple of days to do that. And then your total grant cost is going to be $8,700. So that's your application. Really straightforward. I do want to make the note that even though I did include those landowner rates form in the application, that is one way to do it. Another way is you can have a uniform kind of like, okay, we're going to give a certain amount per landowner. And I'm going to give you a really quick look at what that might look like. We have a rebate form that we use generally when we do that type of thing. And I just want you guys to get eyes on it. It is on our website, so I'll let you go look at it a little bit more in depth there. But for just right now, I want you guys to see what this looks like so you have a better understanding, because I think people have a hard time sort of knowing what to expect. I think this is it. Hold on. Are you guys seeing landowner rates, or is it this one?
I'm seeing landowner rates.
Apologies, give me a second. I have too many windows. There it is. There we go. Okay. So this is like a rebate form. Again, this may not be the exact one we end up using with you, but this is one we already have. And so it would just have your basic information here, and then we would go down, and for some reason it's not letting me scroll in this view. So essentially it just gives you, what kind of things we'd be looking for. It's just check boxes that somebody goes through and does a quick assessment. I apologize, it won't let me scroll. This webinar thing is difficult. Sorry, guys. Well, I don't know if it's going to let me do it. Okay, well, I'll share that with you guys. I'll send out an email again. You guys can enjoy my emails so that you can take a look at that so you have a better understanding. You might be able to see it better anyway. So I'm just going to go to my second example here. So this would be the larger group of grant funding. That would be the $10,001 to $75,000, sometime somewhere in there where you have to have a sponsor. So this one technically would be like, this is an example, a county decided to sponsor 3 different communities. They're all asking for different amounts. The first community is going to be hiring a contractor for fuels mitigation on 25 homes, ranging from about 1 to 2 acres, and it's going to cost them about 20 grand. That was the bid that they got from the contractor. Cool, great, pretty straightforward. Again, remember this is all reimbursement, so upfront costs will have to be figured out there. And again, I don't want to get too in detail because there's a lot that each of the different grant agreements can be set up like. So if you want to have offline conversations, please let me know. Second community, they're going to do a debris bin rental of about $1,000. They're hiring contractors to do some mitigation work on a community space. And then they have 10 unit properties that they're going to do, and that's going to total them $35,000. And then the third community, they've got ODF crew work, and they're going to do 45 acres of property. And it's really straightforward. We just pay our ODF crews to do it. And that ended up being $43,000. So the sponsor is going to be managing and submitting those applications, and ODF will be creating a grant agreement with that sponsor specifically. So any details that kind of come out there will be worked out with the sponsor, but they will essentially be somewhat managing it on the other side because we don't have a whole lot of capacity in the field to be doing that. So I'm going to leave that there with my presentation. This is the link, if you guys didn't catch it from Alex, that has all of this information. It's got that, that rebate form that I was just talking about in there. And it's got the application itself. It's got the mapping. It's got everything you could possibly want. Here's all my information. You guys can get a hold of me. And that is it for my presentation. But I'm available to answer more questions, which looks like we've got like 21 of them. So hang tight. If you got questions, I'll get rolling through them here. And Alex, you feel free to join me too, as I'm sure some of these probably pertain to you as well. I'm going to leave up that link just for anybody who wants to write it down or can't get it, or maybe Derek, you could throw it in the chat for anybody who doesn't have it. So questions here, we have a couple of Firewise communities that have been meeting and are close, but not complete with their application yet. Is there a cutoff date for when they become or became a Firewise community? My decision on that was just once the application was sent out, if you were a current Firewise community, then you could apply. But if you are not, then at this time, it is too late to apply for this grant. So as of the application, call for applications, you would have had to be already a Firewise community. That doesn't mean there might not be additional iterations of this grant becoming available as funding is available. So, keep going on it. And then at that time, if a new call for applications happens next year or anything like that, then you would become eligible. If you have a dozen property owners wishing to do fuels mitigation within a Firewise neighborhood, you can include them all in a single application under the name of the Firewise. Yeah, that's the point of it. The community itself is applying for the grant. So it doesn't mean that every single person in, like, let's say you have a bunch of dwelling units who are in your Firewise community and they don't all want to participate. That's okay. You don't have to have everybody participate to get the funding. Does creation of defensible space include things like replacing bark mulch with river rock? Okay, I've gotten this question quite a bit. Creation of defensible space has to be fuels mitigation focused. So we are not going to be paying to put rock around people's homes. It would be the removal of dead and dying vegetation or vegetation too close to the home or pruning up next to the home. It needs to be fuels mitigation focused. I know defensible space in Firewise has additional elements to it, replacing decking, doing things on roofing, things like that. This is not home hardening. This specific grant has things to do with fuels mitigation only, and defensible space in the sense of managing vegetation around the home. Okay, I think we answered this one. See here, how do I find out if I'm in an existing Firewise community? We have, NFPA has a website that has a bunch of information, and I can get that added either to the chat, or I can shoot out an email to you, Linda. If you reach out to me, actually, that would be a great way. If you have some questions specifically, you've got my information up here. Please feel free to email me and I'll get you that specific info. Can poison oak be included for removal as invasive species? Yes, please. Invasive species removal is a fuels mitigation activity. So any kind of invasive species removal can be definitely included. in any of those activities as part of your grant. Even if you wanted to focus everything on invasive species, you guys had a bunch of stuff and you wanted to get all the invasive species out. Yes, okay, that's fine with us. Firewise question, is a funding match required by property owners? It is not. This is 100% rebate. So 100% covered, but keep in mind upfront costs come from either a sponsor or from the landowner. So there would be an upfront cost with 100% rebate, as long as you meet the criteria of what we set out in regards to what you've signed up to do. It does need to get completed, and then we'll pay you. So my Firewise community is small, only 12 households. Can we partner with one or more of other Firewise communities in one application to raise our numbers to get more points? No. If you are in a Firewise community, you have to report specifically for your community and the number that are in there. And you'll find that there are other ways to get points in there. Though I will say you can partner with other Firewise communities under a certain sponsor, and that may or may not help in some ways for you getting funded, but we're not prioritizing that necessarily. But if we have one sponsor who's willing to do like 3 or 4 different communities, that might be an easier way to kind of jump on board with that. We can talk more specifics if you have more questions about that, but at this time, we're not joining communities in the application. What if we have more than one risk level in our area? That's a good question. Take your highest. That's easy. How do I find out an existing community? Marcos and Denise, it looks like you guys are trying to figure that out too. Feel free to email me directly and let's get it figured out. And I can direct you guys where you need to go to look up the Firewise stuff. How do you know if my community is a Firewise community that's been doing Firewise practices with some of the homeowners? I mean, you can definitely reach out to whoever's been running those practices and find out. And we have regional coordinators assigned to each community. So that would probably be the person who's working there. If it is a Firewise community, doing that outreach, doing those practices, working with the landowners, you usually know if you're in a Firewise community. But again, if you need to, please feel free to reach out to me directly and we'll track it down and figure out what's going on in your area.
So Jenna, I think also a part of that question is, how do you know if they're in a Firewise community? And so I believe that there's a registration of the Firewise community that you're able to have access to know whether a Firewise community is registered as a Firewise community.
Yeah, thank you, Derek, for that clarification. That if that's how you're asking it, I know all. No, I'm just kidding. I am the state liaison for the Firewise program. And so I am the one who actually approves all of the applications at the state level. And so I see every single application that comes in. And I have access to see all the information of what your applications are, how many people are in there, everything that you possibly could do with Firewise. I'm pretty much involved in it and I talk to your regional coordinators. So that's how I know. Is the Firewise grant a reimbursement for work done or is it funds to do the work? It is a reimbursement. We are not directly contracting with contractors on your behalf. It is you directly doing that work or contracting with the contractors, and then we will reimburse you for the work once it's completed. Some examples of defensible space projects that would be considered. Yeah, I mean, defensible spaces, I mean, you can do limbing up of any kind of vegetation around the home. You can cut back, prune away from if you have like a big tree that's hanging over the roof, you need to cut back the branches from that. Removal of vegetation around the home directly, any kind of defensible space, where you're limbing up, pruning, thinning, around the home, those would all be considered defensible space. Even if you're removing dead and dying debris, anything like that, that would all be defensible space type of projects. Alex, anything you're thinking off your top of your head you want to throw in there?
I think that rebate that we posted online, the kind of defensible space checklist will give you some ideas too. So if you go onto that website and find the defensible space form, it'll kind of have a whole bunch of check boxes, everything from cleaning out gutters, pruning trees, removing dying and dead. Yep. So it's it's a full page of ideas.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Alex. That's perfect. We have all of it listed on that rebate form. Again, I'll get that sent out, or you guys can take a look on the website and find it there. Preferences giving to those who do not use contractors but instead pay. Oh, so this is the ODF crew question about preferences. So what that means is not necessarily that if you have an ODF crew that you get a preference or a higher score. What that means is that when it comes down to it, all things being equal, and we're at the end of our funding, like we do a scoring system, right? So we're scoring down based on the scores that you were getting for your guys' applications. And there's like a tie at the end where things have gotten equally scored out. In that case, if one of them had an ODF crew and the other one did not, then we would prioritize the ODF crew as a tiebreaker for the final funding. But that doesn't mean that those other scores up above got any kind of priority. If they scored higher, then they would get their own priority. It doesn't mean that the ODF crew specifically was going to get called out, but it created an opportunity for us to both help build capacity and figure out how we could do kind of a tiebreaker when it comes down to that kind of final funding where the scores are all equal and we're kind of at the end of the funding source. So hopefully that answers that. So don't feel like if you don't have an ODF crew available to you, or you're not in an area that's going to hurt you in any way, shape, or form. Are agencies allowed to put in for both grants? I think Alex answered this previously. Yes, if you meet the criteria for both grants, then yes, you can apply for both. And then if we have a few Firewise communities and oops, I think you took it away, Derek. I think there was a second part of that question I missed.
Sorry, I didn't think it. So going into the answered portion.
We have a few Firewise communities and lots of areas that want to become Firewise communities that need fuels reduction. Oh, okay. So it was just kind of a statement. It wasn't a question. Gotcha. Was it fast enough to read? There's so many.
Jen, I might add on that example, the small Forestland Grant would probably be the more appropriate funding mechanism if you had folks that weren't Firewise communities, but you wanted to engage them.
Yes, great point. Yeah, there's a lot of grant funding available out there, and there's even grant funding through other entities right now through Senate Bill 762. So please just reach out to anybody if you're not in a Firewise community and you want to get some funding. I'm pretty sure there's going to be something out there for you. So can the projects be more than 100 foot from the residence? Yes, you can do fuels mitigation further out on your property. That's totally acceptable. Can I apply for removal of selected trees on different homeowner lots? I mean, you can't have trees removed from somebody else's property that you don't own. But I think what you're saying is that if you own different homeowner lots, can you apply for removal of selected trees on those different lots? Maybe, I don't know that I'm reading this right, but and then have ODF decide which trees to remove. If you have multiple homeowners lots and you're in a Firewise community and you're part of that community, as long as it doesn't overdo the minimum acreage that Alex is indicating, and you had an ODF crew, then you could definitely put that in your application. As long as you're working with the community. If this is a Firewise question.
I think on both, you can remove, I mean, tree removal, thinning, non-commercial thinning would be an eligible activity. As long as it's meeting that intent of reducing high severity wildfire risk, right? So a large canopy tree, maybe not, but a smaller one, absolutely eligible activity.
Okay. There's a lot of questions. We might have to cut it off at some point, guys, but I'll keep going as long as I can here. I am an OSWA and Clackamas County woodland farmer and have not heard of any of the grant opportunities or Firewise mentioned. Can my email be added to the contact list? I do not qualify, so I'm leaving the meeting. Oh, okay, well, somebody left. Sorry, I didn't read the whole question before I said it out loud. If someone has received a Lane County Firewise grant dealing with defensible space, how does that member of the Firewise, Firewise community affect how we score that part?
Yeah, that Firewise in Lane County is a grant for structure retrofits. And so based on your previous answer, Jen, I think that would be non-fuel reduction, in which case you wouldn't have to report that.
Yeah, and if you just apply for a grant and you hadn't received funding, you could still apply for this, even if it was a fuels reduction grant that you applied somewhere else, but you don't have funding. You haven't been. I'd say if you've been awarded the funding, then you do need to report it. But if you've just applied for something, you don't need to report that. If you have enough funding, are you planning to fund all qualifying applications? Or do you expect to have points of cutoff? We expect to have points of cutoff. There's been so much interest. I have a feeling we're going to get plenty. This funding pot right now for the Firewise specific side of thing is $750,000. So we're hoping to fund quite a few, but we're not sure. We'll see what people ask for. It could be tons of little ones or some big ones, and then it gets used up a lot faster. So we do expect cutoffs. And then, just keep in mind too, that this might not be the only iteration. More opportunities might come available.
And I would also just add that if you have a low risk or a smaller community, it's definitely still worth applying. I mean, those are only two of the points, and yeah.
Definitely, please still apply. I think even, think about it this way. If you've applied and you have a small number of members or low risk, we might have funding later. And instead of recalling for applications, we might just continue to fund what we have available of applications that have been turned in. So, just continue to please, get those applications in so that we have them on file that you're interested and that you want it. And then if we have money, we'll give it to you. Good point, Alex. Thank you. How do you arrange for ODF crew work? Well, I would definitely start with calling your ODF office, your local ODF office, and find out if they have a crew. And then if they do have a crew, ask them if they have anything available where they could be available for this program. Our ODF members are aware of this program, and hopefully the areas that have crews available might even be reaching out to you. But if not, please just reach out to your local ODF office and see. Now, I have had kind of a funny question about utilizing crews from other areas. And I think that's completely acceptable if that is something that ODF works out within its own walls, that a different district has a crew available, but they want to keep them working through through the winter time, and they don't have tons of work in their area, they might be available to you. So just reach out to your ODF person and they'll talk to you about what they have available. Our project area is split on the Oregon Explorer map between both moderate and high. I think, as we mentioned before, go with your high risk. Please just choose your highest risk. We'll just go with that. I think that we're going with what do you have there that is the highest risk rating that you have available. Thank you for the clarification, though. Deadlines are different between the two programs. Is that correct, Alex?
They are. I'm really sorry, guys. I know that's a little bit confusing. The Firewise application is due about a week before the small Forestland Grant. They're both due in December. I believe the Firewise is the 14th, Jenna. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
Okay. They're within a week of each other, and that really is just to give us an opportunity to kind of catch up on the amount of applications that we're anticipating from this. Yeah, Derek, I see you're probably looking at time here.
Yeah. So what you just said? No. Actually, what I was looking at was the application deadline, and you said both in December, but both are in January.
Thank you. Definitely not. Yeah, they're both in January.
Yeah, so
January 21st is a small Forestland Grant, and the Firewise, we have it pulled up there, but about a week before.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's what it is starting to get late, and it seems that as you guys are answering questions, more questions get added. So there's always just a bank of 20 questions there, regardless of how many you answer. So I think there's several questions that I'm going to clear here that were all about ODF crews, that sort of thing. So I think that's kind of been addressed. But I do would ask, so I can check a few of these off, what a post-project audit or what the verification process looks like for the funding of the approved applications.
Yeah, so if you get awarded the funding, we'll be going through this more specifically. I don't want to get too far into the weeds here because it just really depends on how you applied and what you're doing out there and how difficult or complicated that is. basically you're essentially going to say you're going to do a certain amount of work or whatever's going to happen. Then you're going to do it. And then a regional coordinator, so like a Firewise coordinator like you normally work with, or an ODF person, or perhaps even a fire department person, some sort of technical expert is going to come out and certify that you did the work, or that the work was done by the contractor or whatever, and that it met those guidelines. Then once that's done, there's paperwork to be filed, and then that will go up the chain, and then you'll get reimbursed 3 to 4 weeks later. So that's, I'm simplifying this significantly, but I just like, that's essentially what it is. There'll be forms that we specifically have to fill out depending on how you set up the grant application, if it's going to be individual landowners or a sponsor, or if there's going to be an agreement. There's a lot of technicalities there that are going to be conversations between us if you get scored high enough to get the funding. So don't worry about it. We will let you know. I think the biggest thing is just get a plan together on what you want to do out there, and then we'll give you all the details on how to get the funding and what to expect with that. Does that, anything more to add to that, Alex? I don't want to do too high level, but I really don't want to get in the weeds on that one too much.
No, I think that's great. We'll work with folks as they get, as they rank out, and we'll make sure that we're on the same page there. But there's definitely going to be some type of inspection reporting, visit to make sure that this happens. Yep.
Oh, and one note on that too, I did mention in there, we're going to be asking before and after pictures. One of the ways that we can kind of certify a third party type of thing with this sort of thing, because obviously, if it's, we just need to have sort of a third party piece there that verifies. So having a before and after picture, those do not need to include home addresses or anything personal of nature. That is the fuels mitigation actual, work that's being done, showing a before and after to meet those requirements that we're setting up in your prescription. So it's a standard practice with most all of our grant funding. So grant from county considered a grant here. It has to be a Firewise community. So if the county is a sponsor, that's fine. But the county itself can't apply. It has to be, they apply as the sponsor for the community. The community has to be.
I think, Jen, what they might be getting at here, if a grant from the county funded fuel reduction activity, then that would count towards that question. So I think about there's certain counties that may actually fund fuel reduction activities for Firewise communities, and that would, what we're saying is if it's fuel reduction grant, that counts.
Yes, thank you. Okay, sorry, I'm reading these different ways to interpret, I guess. Okay, is there an ownership limit, acreage? It is the same across all of both the grants. So it's that 160 west of the Cascades and 640 or 600. Sorry, Alex.
640. Yeah, it's the same. They're both under the Small Forestland Grant program. They both have to adhere to that bill language. Yes, same for all of the above. It's the same pot of money technically we're using this from, so it's the same stipulation there. Is this only for work starting after acceptance of applications for grants? I think we talked about that. Is this only for work? Yeah, and so it's the work after. Oh, I see what they're getting at there. It is not for previous work that's being done. It will be new work that is being done going forward after you get the grant approval. It'll be what you're doing going forward, not what you've already done. To be honest, almost all of these Firewise communities have been doing work, so we can't account for all of that. We just got to go forward with what you are planning to do. What is appropriate to report to if a Firewise community is partially in the UBG or UGB? Alex, ask them that one. I think we should do the same thing that we're doing with high risk. So if you're, if you're 90% in and 10% out, okay, then you're probably within the UGB. But if you're, close to 50-50, you can go ahead and say you're outside of the urban growth boundary. Okay. So majority, go with your majority. Okay. Will there be a change in who can write Firewise assessments for new Firewise communities given the bottleneck of current designated assessors? Will there be a change in who can write maybe I'm not understanding this one. Will there be a change in who can write Firewise assessments? Then this might be a question generally for Firewise communities. This funding program isn't going to fund Firewise assessments. It will fund work done, but I think that's a. Thank you. Yep. That was throwing me off. Nope. Yep. No, it's not going to do anything to help you get more Firewise assessments done or make your person more available to you, unfortunately.
They may be less available because they've got more work to do on their plates. Sorry, guys. Can individual landowners in the Firewise community get a rebate if they do the work themselves? Yes. There's multiple ways to do that, and we covered some of it. I think, Jennifer, if you have specifics on that, let's talk more about it. But how you set up in the grant, they can do a flat rate, kind of like in my example, or you could do sort of as a community, you guys could set it up that way. Or there's landowner equipment rates, landowner rates, that volunteer hour and things like that all accounted for, and you would track it with that, and that would be a little bit more of an in-depth kind of way to set up your grant, but you can do it that way as well. So let's talk offline on that. There's a couple different ways you can do it. Sarah, is the focus mostly on homes or also along driveways, dead end roads, escape routes, and also maybe creating or enhancing fire breaks? Fuels mitigation focused, and then yeah, if there's access issues and you guys want to do some fuels mitigation along the roadsides and driveways, let's do it. That can all be part of it. We can't do any work like on creating new roads or fixing up roads or anything of that nature. It needs to be all fuels mitigation focused. So, and we do want to put a priority on, not us, like we're not going to choose for you, but I would definitely prioritize making sure the defensible space for the properties is also a component in there too, just to protect the people, not just the escape routes maybe. But please, if you have escape routes or if you have areas that need to get cut back because fire apparatus can't get in there or anything like that, that's all part of it. I'm running out. I'm 3 left. Is the focus mostly on homes or also, oh wait, did I answer that one? Okay. Along with the fuel reduction, does a fire cache or large fire pond qualify as reimbursement? We're not funding for any kind of capital improvement or creating fire ponds available or anything like that. It's all fuels mitigation focused. A place where using the grant money outside the Firewise community would be useful is when a neighbor / is endangering our driveway safety. Could funding be used for that if we got permission from that landowner? Unfortunately, you can't do work on other people's properties. If that landowner would like to go ahead and sign up for part of the program and you guys were going to get like a contractor to come out and do all the work, that's fine. But that, just for liability issues, I would say that if there's things that is going on that person's property, they need to be specifically involved and basically signing up for the program. And then if you guys want to do something where you're going to cover the costs for that contractor to come out and do it, then fine. I hesitate to have anybody do work on somebody else's property, and we will not be necessarily supporting that. Unless it's true.
That said, if you've been working with that landowner, it's a need that's identified by the community, and that's part of the fuel treatment that you guys have identified as a community that you want to prioritize, and you've got all that lined out, then I would say that would technically be an eligible expense, right? So as long as you've got,
you have to have permission from that landowner and everything. You can't do it without them involved somehow. Okay.
Well, folks, I think we got through a lot of questions. I want to hand it over to Derek, but before I do, I just wanted to let folks know that my contact information is in the chat, and that small Forestland Grant email that's on the website. I'm tracking that as well. So if you have any questions for either Jenna or myself, please reach out and we'll do our best to kind of answer some of these more technical, project-specific related questions. Really appreciate your time, and I saw someone said that I need to get like a touch screen to navigate this better. And, so I'll be passing that up the chain. No, I'm kidding. I appreciate you guys bearing through me with that, and I will pass it off to Jenna and Derek for closing comments.
Well, I will just ask if Megan or Jenna have anything to add before I kind of close and have kind of next steps once we're done here, and when you can find additional information and where you can find it. Jenna?
I just want to say thank you guys so much for bearing through all this with us. And I see, gosh, we still have a lot of participants here. So thanks for holding out and going through all those questions. There was a lot of them, and I know you have more. So hopefully we do our best to answer them to the best of our ability. So thanks again.
So just as closing, I as well want to say thank you to everyone that's participated, including ODF staff, members of Firewise communities, folks who are interested in the Small Forest Land Grant Program. Please do visit the website for information. The recording of this applicant workshop will be there. We will be combing through some of the questions asked today to add to the frequently asked questions that are on the website. So hopefully you can find more information there if you didn't get your question answered today. And then also both Alex and Jenna have graciously provided their contact information. So if you have very specific questions about how this might apply to you, please send them directly to those folks, or just to the Small Forest Land Grant Program email that's available on the website. Alex is maintaining that and responding to folks as quickly as possible. So again, thank you, everyone. The website link is in the chat, but you can always go to oregon.gov/ODF. And you can find information there. It's pretty easy to navigate. Focus on Senate Bill 762, and then you'll find the Small Forest Land Grant Program and other grant opportunities available through Senate Bill 762 on the department's website. So again, thank you so much. And this recording will be available sometime afternoon tomorrow by Wednesday morning at the latest. And again, thank you all for your time and for being patient with us. We originally planned for an hour, and we're after an hour and 45 minutes. Thank you for staying with us. We really appreciate it. We hope you found the information that you needed, and hope you understand where to get it if you weren't able to get your questions addressed today. So thank you so much. Have a good day.